Assalamu alaikum, student. This is Dr. Kamran Ali. Today I'll be discussing how to write a commentary for paper one. Let's begin. First of all, we need to keep in mind key analytical approaches. The first one is to identify linguistics device. Now, we have discussed lots of linguistic devices during our classes, and I've given you, uh, I think, a PDF about that, right? Uh, for example, you need to identify personification, metaphors, similes, facts, statistics, anecdotes, all of those things, rule of three. All these literary devices have been discussed in the class, so you have to try to identify them in the text. Another thing which you really need to look for that is tense analysis. Examine how verb tense shapes narrative perspective, present tense, past tense, future tense, and with that, how the meanings are being shaped. Then, point of view exploration, whether the author has written the first person perspective, second person perspective, or the third person point of view. You have to identify that, not only that, also how it shapes the meaning. And finally, you need to look at the structure. Structure means you have to analyze how text organization creates meaning, how the information flows, what is the layout of the text, all of that. Let's go ahead. I think it got stuck. Just wait for a while, please. Here we go. Let me erase this line first. Okay. Tense analysis techniques include identification of the past tense. What does past tense actually do? It creates distance, reflection, and often evokes nostalgia or memory provides historical context, right? So distance means that something happened way back and the writer is talking about that, right? So it creates that sense. Present tense establishes immediacy and urgency, something happening right before the reader, right? Usually, descriptive passages are written in present tense, draws readers directly into the action as it unfolds. Future tense builds anticipation, expectations, foreshadowing, gives hint what may happen, often signals hopes, fears, or predictions. Tense shifts creates tension, highlights key moments, or signals time jumps in narrative. So maybe flashbacks being used in the passage, and you have to comment on that. Then comes point of view, first person, second person, third person. Excuse me. First person, third person, omniscient. First person creates intimacy through direct character perspective using I and or we, right? So you write about uh, the writer writes about himself, right? Okay, and he is the part of all those things which are happening around him. Second person engages readers directly using you, creating immersive experience. That means the reader is in sort of, involved what is happening, right? The writer draws the reader's attention this way. And the third person, limited, follows one character's perspective without using I. That means the writer knows a lot uh, about the character, but in a limited way, right? The third person omniscient offers access to multiple characters' thoughts and feelings. The writer can also reflect on what the characters thinking, right? And the writer can show their thinking, share with the reader, and all that. And then there are, if you understand all of this, right? Okay, these point of view, right? They create certain effects, right? And that those effects you have to talk about. Linguistic device identification can be divided into three major: figurative, sensory, structural elements. Structural elements means you can comment on sentence length, paragraph structure, syntax variation. That means variety of sentences, punctuation choices. Sensory language means sight, smell, hearing, right, touch, and then all that. Figurative language, metaphors, similes, personification, symbolism. All of these things we have discussed in the class also. What you really need to do is to stay focused and look for these elements in the text. Sample passage analysis, introduction. Identify passage type, determine if narrative, descriptive, argumentative, or expository. Note key characteristics, observe predominant tone, mood, stylistic features. Always remember predominant. That means the one which are reoccurring, right? You appearing again and again in the text. Recognize context, consider narrative situation, settings, speaker's position. Prepare analytical framework. That's not exactly for you guys, but yes, you can like brainstorm how you're going to approach the text, how you're going to structure your own commentary, right? This way. Sample passage one, descriptive technique. The ancient shoreline stretched before him like a withered arm, its sand bleached bone white against the bruised sky. Waves the color of slate lapped indifferently at the coast, whispering secrets in a language long forgotten. The salt-laden air clung to his skin, as persistent as memory itself, while distant gulls carved melancholy arcs against the gathering storm. This passage employs rich descriptive language to create atmosphere and convey emotional undertones through nature imagery. That is the sum up of the of the passage, right? The sum up impression, or we say the key impression of the passage, right? So that means later, you're going to touch upon all those things, right, which are creating atmosphere, which convey emotion undertones through nature imagery and all that, right? Let's have a look at the detailed commentary components here. The writer has used extended metaphor. Let's analyze that. The personification of the shoreline as withered arm, establishing aging and fragility as central themes. This bodily metaphor creates immediate visual impact. Now you can see over here, the commentator is identifying the keyword, right, or the device, right, and also discussing the meaning it gives. So if you just identify the writer has used personification, that wouldn't be enough. You have to also elaborate the meaning, right? It's giving, and then the effects are being created here. This bodily metaphor creates immediate visual impact. This is how you have to, comment on the key areas, right, or key things available in the passage or components available in the passage, right? Second one is color symbolism examination. The deliberate contrast between bone white, again, identification of the device, bruised sky, again, the identification of the device evokes mortality and violence, creating ominous atmosphere through color imagery. Now, this is the effect over here. Sensory language exploration, multisensory descriptions, visual, bleached, auditory, whispering, and tactile clung create immersive reader experience, right? That means the reader is experiencing everything, right? Then personification assessment, waves that whisper secrets suggest nature holds knowledge beyond human understanding, establishing mysterious tone through personification. So once again, the explanation of the meaning you actually receiving when you're reading the text, identification of the device and the effect, right? So you need to understand that this is how you're going to write a commentary. If you simply identify the devices and you don't focus on the meaning, you don't focus on the impacts, right? Okay, or the effects being created by the writer, and you don't comment on that, you won't be getting good marks. In fact, you will be at a lower tier. Okay, let's go ahead. Sample passage 2, narrative perspective. You stand at the window watching the city dissolve into the evening. The buildings, once solid and imposing, now shimmer uncertainly in the gathering darkness. People move below, their purposes unknown to you. Perhaps they hurry home towards some promise of connection. You press your hand against the cool glass. The city continues its transformation, indifferent to your witness. Tomorrow arrives regardless of who observes its coming. This passage employs second-person perspective to create immediacy while exploring themes of isolation and urban detachment. Now, always remember that you have to take out the major impression first, right? And then you have to explain that later, right? For example, if it's a huge passage, what is the subject matter? What is the main idea of that passage? What uh, most obvious devices have been employed? That all of this, right, can be summed up in the first paragraph, introductory paragraph, and then you can, take your commentary ahead, exploring all of these areas, right? Let's go ahead now. Second person perspective analysis, direct address creates uncomfortable intimacy and universal experience. Urban setting as character, city portrayed with agency through verbs, dissolve, and transformation. Always remember that you have to refer to the text. Always include examples, include words, lexics from the text and comment on them, right? Collective anonymity exploration, unnamed people with purposes unknown, establish alienation and theme. And you always keep this thing in mind that you have to write about the effects being created. Otherwise, it's useless. Temporal progression examination, movement from evening to tomorrow creates philosophical time frame. So it means that you really need to think a lot. When you're reading, you need to think about the device, identify the devices, think about how they're creating meanings and what meanings they are creating and uh, how they may be impacting, the reader, the effects being created by the writer. Okay, common pitfalls to avoid vague generalization. Avoid statements like the author uses good description without specific analysis, right? Don't simply identify devices without explaining their effect or purpose. As I discussed earlier, also, excessive quotation. Avoid lengthy quotes that substitute for your own analysis. So don't keep up just simply quoting and quoting and quoting. You quote something, you explaining, elaborate it, and you only quote the things which you believe that are to be quoted, right? You are not going to quote everything, right? Keep that thing in mind. Plot summary, focus on analysis rather than retelling what happens in the passage. You don't have to retell what happens in the passage. You can talk about what is happening, but then how is this happening means that how the writer is, presenting that happening. That's should be the focus rather than what is happening. You can link what is happening with the style, but incorporating, commentary about the style is something which is needed, and that's what you get the marks for, right? Okay. Okay, time management strategies: 5 minutes initial reading, 10 minutes planning, 30 minutes writing, 5 minutes review. Right. So this is right. If it's 20, 15, and 40, 45, 50 minutes at least, you should be given to one passage, because there are going to be uh, two passages and you get around 2 hours, 15 minutes, something. Crafting an effective introduction, passage overview, briefly characterize the text's main features, tone without excessive summary, identify genre and narrative perspective, what type of text it is. Analytical direction, signal the main linguistic features your commentary will explore, create a roadmap for your analysis. Context recognition, acknowledge relevant setting, speaker situation that frames the passage, establish analytical framework. This is something which is not much required in A levels, but again, if you incorporate some of the context, right, okay, that will definitely help you make the examiner understand what are you trying to comment on and why. Multiple interpretative lenses apply diverse analytical frameworks. Layered analysis connect different textual elements, not just one or two or three elements, right? Okay, you may talk about personification and maybe anecdotes and facts and statistics or first person perspective. So layered analysis is very important here. Then structural patterns identify organization principles, right? How the writer has organized the text, recognize fundamental techniques, basic device recognition. Linguistic device deep dive, metaphor analysis, syntactic variation, sound techniques. Extended metaphors, conceptual frameworks, implied comparison, metaphorical patterns, and all that, right? Conceptual frameworks, if available, not necessarily that every text has the conceptual framework, right? Syntactical variations, sentence length, clause structure, periodic sentences, fragment effects, and all that. Fragments means where the writer has used some phrases, right? Okay, and they are not sentences, and that has been done for the effects purpose. Sound techniques, alliteration, assonance effects, rhythmic structure, onomatopoeia elements, and all that. Now, these are some of the examples, right? They are not enough. I have given you the list where you have lots of literary devices. So you use that PDF, right, and practice. Connecting devices to meaning, identify the device, name the specific technique using precise terminology. Quote precisely, select brief, relevant textual evidence. This is something very important. Then analyze effect, explain how device creates specific meaning, and link effect to author's overall intention, the purpose, what exactly the author is trying to achieve, right, through that piece of writing. This is something very important. So please keep this order in mind, because this will help you to a great extent, right? In writing some commentaries and all that, right? Practical application technique, annotation practice, timed writing, model answer analysis, study exemplary commentaries to understand effective analytical approach. I have given you some examples, some samples, commentary samples, and all that. Please, you must review them. I'll be uploading some more. Examination success combines through preparation with strategic time management, careful attention to instructions. Final preparation tips, practice with past papers, very analytical approaches, build analytical vocabulary. That is something also important. That means you need to uh, build a word bank about writing a commentary, right? When you're writing a commentary, you use certain words. For example, the writer is trying to create an effect. This is, an example of how what sort of vocabulary like you use when you are analyzing a text, right? And there are a lot of examples, right, available online also, and I'll be also sharing some sheets about that. Thank you, class. That's enough for my side today. I believe that this will be helpful. If you have any question, do ask me in class. Thank you. Take care. Allah Hafiz.